Good evening, adventurers. We have another horror story for you. In this story we have a DM that tries to push their suggestions on their players, and when the player pushes back and says that doesn't mix with that character, and the DM tells them rules that are incorrect, and when told that those rules are incorrect, they end up arguing with over 80 people, and this DM then goes to blame our protagonist. Let's get into it. Today's tale is called DM Suggests I Take a Multiclass That Doesn't Mix With My Character, and then reads the rules incorrectly and argues with 80 plus people and blames me. Session 1 of this campaign ended with my level 3 Bear Totem Barbarian reaching level 4 and finding a freaking overpowered magical Great Axe that did an insane 2d12 damage. Which sounds broken, but the DM just made everyone OP and then gave every monster health until the fight was dramatic enough for them to die. I'm not criticising this DM style, I had fun playing this way. The issue is what happened next. In later sessions we find out that the axe belonged to the big bad evil guy who used it to put a curse on the moon somehow, so it randomly does Zelda Breath of the Wild Blood Moon thing and summons cursed demons when it turns red. The big bad died after that and is reincarnated now thousands of years later and wants to get his axe back, so the DM suggests my now mid-level barbarian character multiclasses into either Hexblade or Eldritch Knight to bind the weapon to me, so the big bad can't get it back and return to his former world-ending level of power. I don't think you can say something is still a suggestion when the consequences for not doing it are the world you are playing in will likely end. And with this knowledge, my character would certainly rather take 3 levels in another class that nerfs him than risk the alternative. So I try to be a good sport about it, and I do my research on the feasibility of multiclassing into Hexblade or Eldritch Knight. Hexblade is a definite no. As a level 7 Bear Totem Barbarian with a 2d12 axe, my entire character is built to be face to face with my enemies, tanking damage and raging. No spells I would get by level 3 Warlock would ever be even 1/10 as useful as my melee attack, and I would need to not be raging to cast them, so I'd never use anything from the Hexblade class ever. Not to mention I'd have to take 3 levels up with a d8 hit die, which being a Bear Totem Barbarian means 8 less health per level up. Eldritch Knight on the other hand is a fighter subclass, so my hit die would be a d10. I'll get a fighting style, second wind and an action surge. Fighter and Barbarian multiclass works very well, so the only real wasted level would be level 3 when I go into Eldritch Knight. But I would still be able to bind 2 weapons to me to summon at will, get 2 wizard cantrips and get 3 level 1 spells to pick. Once again though, I can't think of any way a barbarian with a 2d12 Great Axe is ever going to be casting spells during battle instead of raging and tanking. So I went on r/3d6 to ask for tips on how to make this build work, and they suggested that I focus on spells that would be useful out of combat, and highlighted a few key options. Unfortunately, Eldritch Knight uses intelligence for spellcasting, which is my dump stat, so I'm also further limited by spells that don't require an int roll, unless I want them to never work, of course. So the options I went with were cantrips, control flames. My character has dark vision and an alchemy jug, so between being able to put out torches so I can sneak around in the night, and an infinite, albeit slow, source of oil, I figure this might come in handy. And mending. The world has a lot of islands to travel to, and even if mending only makes small repairs, that can be a huge benefit if something breaks while you're on a boat at sea. Also, I could cut locks or chains and then mend them to make it look like I was never there. And here is where the controversy began. Spells, 2 of which must come from the Abjuration or Evocation schools, and the third can be any wizard spell. First, I chose Alarm. Gives us protection while we sleep, and can be used to monitor an area after I leave it, as long as I'm within a mile of it. Ideas that spring to mind when monitoring a safe house where we are hiding NPCs, or making sure no one is following us down a tunnel or something. The second spell I chose was Snare, just a magical snare trap, could be good for keeping a single person slowed down. Easy to get out of it if anyone else is with you though. Or for giving a quick advantage at the start of combat if you can lure someone into one of them. There is no limit on how many you can set. And finally, Find Familiar, my wildcard spell that can be from any wizard school of magic, and by far the most useful as there are a wide variety of familiars that can help in basically any environment from underwater to in the air to in magical darkness. Owls have 120 feet dark vision, bats have blind sight, octopuses can grab things from underwater, and weasels have like +5 stealth. And anything I can summon can check for traps, or set them off, or pick things up for me, take the help action in combat, or even trade senses with me when they go off exploring. So while the Eldritch Knight is not a great multi-class for me, after about 5 hours of researching it, I'm feeling pretty good. This was my first campaign other than a couple of one-shots, so I had to research every fighting style that fighters get, as well as every wizard cantrip and every level 1 spell. I really put a lot of effort into making it the best it could be, and was more or less happy with the penalty I was taking to protect the world from the big bad getting his weapon back. I tell my DM what I have planned, and he insists that all 3 first level spells the Eldritch Knight takes must be from the Abjuration or Evocation schools of magic, so I can't start with Find Familiar. I showed him the wiki where it says the first 2 spells, and that I get 3 spells total, but he said the wiki didn't mean that. So then I showed him a YouTube video explaining Eldritch Knight with 10,000 views, and he said he didn't trust that guy. So I then linked him to my r/3d6 topic asking for advice, and instead of believing the multiple people that posted on it, he decided to make his own comment on a day old post saying what he believes the rules said, and told me now we'll see. Because no one was going to see his comment and he wouldn't get the feedback he needed, I made a new post in r/3d6 asking for people to respond to his comment and then help him understand the rules, and then I went to bed. I woke up to him with karma in the hundreds of negatives because he'd evidently dug in his heels and decided to argue with the entire internet despite everyone telling him he was wrong. He was furious with me and told me that I disrespected and insulted him because I went on Reddit and got people to post mean comments to him. I told him I never said anything insulting about him, and I was on Reddit to ask them the best way to make the multiclass he made me take work, and that I had no control over what people would say to him if he decided to argue with everybody. He then tried to say he was the DM and he could homebrew the campaign any way he wants, and I told him that was absolutely 100% true. He could make a rule that the Eldritch Knight doesn't get any spells if he wanted, but we were having a disagreement about what was written in the rules, not how he wanted to run his campaign. And I was hoping he wouldn't homebrew Eldritch Knight to be even worse than it already was when mixed with a barbarian for no reason. He said I was ruining his campaign because I was happy everyone was being mean to him. I told him I actually asked Reddit to stop dislike bombing him when I saw he had decided to fight with everyone, and that the real thing that was ruining his campaign was the fact that the Player's Handbook, a popular YouTube video, and 80 plus people on Reddit could all tell him he made a minor mistake in the rulings, and instead of just saying, "Oh my bad," or "Oh well I want to run it like this instead," he would argue with every one of them. And then he called me a cheater because for levels 3 and 4 of the Barbarian I had misread Reckless Attack, where it said you must declare on your first attack, and assumed for there to be a first attack, that means I must get a second attack when I attack recklessly, and was making 2 attacks. It was an honest mistake and I felt horrible about it, and the DM responded by just offering to let me make an extra attack as my bonus action now that I was level 5, and I felt so bad I said that was too overpowered and I wouldn't take it. After him trying to take a low blow and guilt trip me over an honest mistake I made in the early levels that I still felt terrible about, I decided to leave the server, and this is how my first campaign came to an end. And there we have it. I think, to be honest, this one, granted from just the locus of this story, which is from our protagonist's point of view, it does seem like this DM is incredibly toxic, really aggressive and fairly hostile when it comes to essentially what boils down to just being incorrect, and he seems unable to take that kind of criticism. I think it's for the best that the protagonist left the game after that. Playing Dungeons & Dragons with a toxic DM is just never going to work. I can't think of a single story I've ever read or heard from anybody where the DM was toxic and the game still went fine. I've been in a couple of games myself with a toxic DM, and honestly, I just had to leave after a while, and that was it. Have any of you guys had a DM that is so willing to die on a hill over a rule that they become toxic or aggressive? How did you deal with it? I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Anyway, that's all from me tonight. But remember, the tavern door is always open. Good night.